Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hertie School Anniversary Forum, Europe at a Crossroads. To start our program, please welcome the President of the Hertie School, Cornelia Woll.
Good morning and welcome to everybody for the second day of celebration of the 20 years of the Hertie School here in the beautiful Humboldt Carré. Looking back to move forward is the motto under which we are discussing major challenges of our times by drawing on the lessons of the past and see how they help us to chart a way forward. We have an exciting program for you today, with this beginning panel on security, which we all know is a dear topic to the Hertie School and an important topic of our times. It is followed by a student leaders dialogue where we have the winners of our essay competition discuss with experts and thinkers to ask the most pressing questions. After the lunch break, we have a panel on the challenges for higher education in difficult times, in particular in difficult geopolitical times. It will then be followed by a Student Voices panel where we hear directly from our students on the issues that they believe are the most important ones and the ones insufficiently addressed. And we will close today's ceremony with the conferment of the Henrik Enderlein Prize in memory of our late President Henrik Enderlein. So this is the program for today, and if you've missed yesterday, please pick up some of the material where you can learn of the 20 years of the Hertie School in pictures and with some stories and conversations, and find out what our plans are for the future, and also how you can help to support us. One of the major challenges in the world today is undoubtedly security, in an international order that is undergoing profound changes, and where military threats are closely linked to economic interdependence. While there is a strong need for alliances, strategic partnerships have become more volatile. And domestic politics can threaten the stability of foreign policy, even in the traditional Western alliances. You can see this even in this weekend's election results, where some have campaigned with the very enticing slogan, "Peace, not war," which is very hard to disagree with. But it is quite difficult to say how one should get there. Does peace mean that we should not talk about defense? A strategy that I would say was common in Germany when we outsourced our defense to the NATO alliance. Does it mean that you want peace and therefore you're preparing for war, as a Latin slogan will tell us? Or does peace mean that when you're attacked, you should surrender? As several parties have told Ukraine, for example, and we see that just now in Germany, in the European election, 25% of the voters have given their support to parties that want just that, Ukraine to surrender. To discuss these challenges and to discuss how one can get to a more peaceful world, we have assembled a fabulous panel of experts who have grappled with the very real challenges of security in a world of unorder. Federal Minister of Defense Boris Pistorius, Ambassador Christoph Heusgen, Chairman of the Munich Security Conference, and Federica Mogherini, Rector of the College of Europe and former High Representative of the European Union. Let me begin by introducing our guest of honor and keynote speaker, Federal Minister of Defense of Germany, Boris Pistorius. Before joining the cabinet of Chancellor Olaf Scholz as Federal Minister of Defense in January 2023, Boris Pistorius served in the state government of Lower Saxony as State Minister for Interior and Sports from 2013 and 2022. And if you've missed it, you might have seen that sports and defense are closely linked, for example, in the Invictus Games that draw on veterans, where you have pretty much outscored Prince Harry in a football match where you scored every single goal, and I would like to commend you even for your athletic capacities here. Boris Pistorius also served as Lord Mayor of the city of Osnabrück from 2006 to 2013. Before embarking on his impressive political career, Federal Minister Pistorius studied law at the universities of Osnabrück and Münster after completing his military service. Dear Federal Minister, we're honored to have you with us today, and I would like to give you the floor. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Professor Woll, Ambassador Heusgen, Mrs. Mogherini, ladies and gentlemen, dear students. Thank you very much, Professor Woll, for this very kind introduction. In the first place, I would like to apologize for my English, which is a little rusty, because I never was so lucky as you to study abroad for a couple of months or even years, so sometimes I'm searching for the words, and sometimes I have to ask whether I got you correctly. Anyway, I hope you will understand me. You will. Thank you once more, and it is really an honor to be here today and to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Hertie School. Looking back to move forward, that is the headline of today's anniversary forum. So let me start by looking back. Just a few days ago, we commemorated the 80th anniversary of D-Day. The Normandy landings, this unprecedented military operation, played a decisive role in bringing the war to an end. To me, D-Day is a powerful reminder of what a united and determined alliance can achieve, an alliance that ultimately brought us the liberation from National Socialism. It is also a reminder of how far we have come in Europe since the end of World War II. Let us not forget, 80 years ago, Nazi Germany was an enemy to almost every European nation. Nazi Germany was a country that had tried to destroy everything European. Yet immediately after the war, the Allies granted our country support and solidarity. It is still a miracle to me that the seeds of our European Union began to grow just 5 years after the end of the war, when France's Foreign Minister Robert Schuman proposed creating a European coal and steel community to his European partners. This was the starting point for much greater integration over the next 73 years. Today, we all know it has been a remarkable European journey, from pooling coal and steel to abolishing international borders and national currencies, from 6 to 27 member states. But the European project is not an easy one. It is the result of hard work and strong dedication. The British author Ian Kershaw has written an impressive book about 70 years of European history, which he called Roller Coaster. And indeed, over the past decades, we have experienced some breathtaking moments. We have experienced the feeling of being swept along by uncontrollable forces, and we have traveled some bumpy roads. The European elections, which took place last weekend, confirmed this. I admit they did not in any way show the results I would have wished for. In fact, the opposite has happened. What worries me personally, and what I'm trying to understand, is that so many young people voted for the far right, especially those going to the ballots for the first or second time. What is it they want from Europe, and how can we better respond to their needs? I hope that we can shed some light on this later in the discussion, especially as we see this shift to the far right, not only in Germany, but across Europe as a whole. This wider political trend constitutes a fundamental challenge to the principles the European Union was built upon: inclusivity, solidarity, and unity. It is a signal that many citizens are discontent and feel unheard. We cannot afford to be complacent about this. We must find answers and work harder to address the underlying issues such as migration to Europe, economic concerns, and job insecurities. To me, as a German politician and Minister of Defense, the results of the elections are a call for action. The European project needs attention and it is a continuous work in progress. I strongly believe that the challenges we face today need European and international solutions. I have in fact believed this to be true my entire life. As a young student in France, as the mayor of the city of Osnabrück, with close ties to the neighboring European regions, and as Interior Minister of Lower Saxony, and in this position, for example, I advocated for closer cooperation and more powers for European institutions in internal security, in particular, for example, the strengthening of Europol. Even back then, I found that it is not always easy to reach consensus among us Europeans, but it is ever so important. Sometimes we must actively remind ourselves of the European dream. I'm convinced today the European promise of a life in peace, freedom and prosperity is more relevant than ever. Ladies and gentlemen, the world has rapidly changed over the past decades. When the Hertie School was founded 20 years ago, the world looked different, much different than today. The challenges we presently face are numerous. We are witnessing geopolitical competition around the world. Autocratic leaders are seeking to challenge the democratic system from the outside and from within. Global tensions and regional conflicts are rising, leading to a fragmented world order. Threats are no longer just conventional in nature, they are hybrid, asymmetric, and often unpredictable. Climate change, poverty, and corruption are threatening lives and fueling conflicts. So are terrorism and religious extremism. Sometimes it seems easier to surrender to pessimism in the face of the truly enormous challenges we are facing almost everywhere today. But surrender is no option to me. The only way forward is to tackle the crises and challenges ahead of us with fierce determination. I would like to focus on 3 issues that I believe are crucial to this fight and to our future in Europe. First, I believe Russia's war in Ukraine is Europe's most decisive challenge today. It is the most immediate and most urgent threat to the international order. Russia is, and for the foreseeable future, will continue to be the greatest threat to our common security. Ukraine is fighting for its existence in this cruel war forced on it by a brutal and cynical Russian regime. Putin's illegal and inhumane war continues to bring unspeakable suffering to the Ukrainian people every day. This war is about much more than Russia and Ukraine. This war is about the question of whether we will allow an imperialist power to invade another sovereign state and annex territories in violation of international law, effectively depriving the people of their freedom. Those who pursue their own revisionist agenda around the world are looking very carefully at what is happening in Ukraine. And those who support the rules-based international order must support Ukraine's fight for freedom. That is why Germany is one of the most active supporters when it comes to helping Ukraine. It is our responsibility to strengthen its resilience, and it is our power to support Ukraine in fighting and winning this war. This year alone, we will spend about 7 billion euros on military assistance to Ukraine, but we will need more to cover the dire needs of our Ukrainian friends. Just 10 days ago, during my visit to Ukraine, we announced a new arms package for Ukraine worth 500 million euros. Helping Ukraine is a joint effort. It means that we need to act together in Europe, be it by enforcing joint European sanctions, using the European Peace Facility as a vehicle for our military support, or by providing training to 60,000 Ukrainian soldiers as a part of the European training mission for Ukraine this summer. My second point concerns the collective security of Europe. We need to strengthen our defense at both national and international level so that we are able to respond to today's and tomorrow's threats, be it through bilateral or multilateral initiatives, the EU, NATO, or other formats. The key to a stronger Europe defense is cooperation. We stand together. That is why we are actively engaging in EU defense initiatives. Defense readiness is and has to be our common goal. We are doing this in practice, for example, by creating a military mobility corridor from the Atlantic coast through the Netherlands, Germany, and Poland to the eastern flank. This is an enormously important project if we have to deploy troops quickly across European borders. And Europe is also growing together through bilateral and multilateral cooperation. The integration of the German and Dutch armed forces and the European Air Transport Command are just two out of many examples which show together we can contribute to European security, strengthen interoperability, and fill critical capability gaps. The formula that guides our actions and policies is very simple. A stronger Europe for a stronger transatlantic partnership. We are therefore working hard to strengthen the European pillar within NATO, and we are willing to take responsibility. This takes me to my third and last point. We Europeans need to translate our common responsibility into common strengths by means of more integrated defense efforts, improved military mobility, logistics and infrastructure, and more cooperative defense procurement and development. Our goal is to reduce fragmentation, enhance cost effectiveness, and increase the interoperability of our armed forces, which is urgently needed these days. With this in mind, Chancellor Scholz launched the European Sky Shield Initiative almost 2 years ago. 21 European nations have joined in the meantime. Together with Norway, we are building identical submarines. Together with France, we will develop next-generation air and ground combat systems. Our focus is on cutting-edge technology as well as on interoperability and interchangeability. Our goal is to fill existing capability gaps by planning, developing, procuring, stocking, and maintaining together. Many of you probably know the famous statistics according to which the member states of the EU have 6 times as many different weapon systems in service as the US. This pattern is the same throughout the entire list of equipment. Imagine what cutting down on that variety of equipment would save us. It would reduce costs, enhance compatibility, improve training, make maintenance less complex, and ease the burden on the supply chain. I am convinced that our way forward in European defense requires bold steps. It requires us all to focus on our common goal, which is a strong and stable Europe. It requires us to leave national egoism aside. We do not only need to spend more, we need to spend better, and we need to spend together. When we think about the future of Europe, I want to see a Europe that is resilient, robust, and able to act. A Europe with strong partnerships. A Europe in which our tools and our actions match the changing security environment. But I want to be honest. We are not there yet. We still have a long way to go, and I'm sure the roads will be bumpy once more. Ladies and gentlemen, I've laid out 3 issues that I believe are crucial for our common future. Before we enter into the discussion, I would like to address the students of this school who are set to play a leading role in building our future in Germany, in Europe, but also worldwide. 20 years ago, the Hertie School was founded to prepare the next generation of leaders for the complex challenges we are facing. When you graduate from this school and start your professional journey, it will be up to you to navigate the complexities of this new era. It will be up to you to ensure freedom, and security of Germany and our allies. My message to you today is Germany's history and Germany's future is tied to Europe in a very special way. Europe is about a cooperative future, a common destiny. Ultimately, Europe is about the people and their lives. It is about creating opportunities to live in peace, freedom, and prosperity. Protect our Europe. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your address, and may I also ask Federica Mogherini and Ambassador Heusgen to join me on stage. We will begin right here. Thank you very much, dear Federal Minister, for your ideas and your vision and your call for the future generation of decision makers. I'm now delighted to introduce the two other panelists who've just joined us on stage. I'm honored and pleased to welcome Federica Mogherini here today to share her insights from her vast experience in foreign affairs. Before becoming Rector of the College of Europe in 2020, Federica Mogherini served as the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission from 2014 to 2019. Previously, she served as Minister of Foreign Affairs in Italy in 2014 and was a member of the Italian Parliament, where she was elected for the first time in 2008. Federica Mogherini holds a degree in political science from the University of Rome La Sapienza. I'd also like to welcome Ambassador Christoph Heusgen, who has been the chairman of the Munich Security Conference since 2022. A few highlights in his long career in foreign service include his role as permanent representative of Germany to the United Nations between 2017 and 2021, his position as foreign policy and security advisor to former Chancellor Angela Merkel, and his service as director of the policy unit for High Representative Javier Solana in the General Secretariat of the Council of the European Union from 1999 to 2005. Ambassador Heusgen is a graduate from the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland and studied at Georgia Southern College in the United States and at the Sorbonne in Paris. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us here today, and I would like both of you to have the opportunity to give an opening statement as well. Federica Mogherini, if you accept, I will start with you and then pass to Ambassador Heusgen.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's really a pleasure and honor for me to be here to celebrate the 20th birthday of a sister partner, I would say, of a sister organization. The College of Europe and Hertie School have similar missions. We are a little bit older. We celebrate this year our 75th anniversary, but I think that we share the same mission, the same goal, the same dream, I would say, to try to not only pass knowledge, but also to foster critical thinking and leadership skills that are not only to be applied in leadership roles, but also in active citizenship. So I think that we have a common bond that I'm happy to celebrate together today. And obviously this is also an invitation to join us for our next upcoming celebrations in the future. So I'm very pleased to be here. But also I have to share with you a very personal anecdote. Exactly 10 years ago, I was in this very same room, actually talking about how I would have worked in my mandate as High Representative to start the construction of the defense pillar of the European Union. That was 2014. The Russian war against Ukraine started in those months, because it started fully fledged 2.5 years ago, but the roots of it are indeed in 2014. And I remember in this very same room, I was giving a speech at the presence of, at the time, the Foreign Minister of Germany, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, on how I would have tried to use my mandate as High Representative to start implementing all the provisions of the Lisbon Treaty that at that time were not fully used. And then actually we did it together, including with Germany at the time, starting to activate all the different institutional instruments that were already foreseen but were not used yet. Because at the time, 10 years ago, there was not yet this awareness that the minister just highlighted of how important it was, and it is still, to equip the European Union, which is and stays a peace project, with still all the instruments that security and defense need. Maybe I will use this few minutes to not so much to comment, because I understand afterwards we'll have the possibility to interact, but also maybe to share a little bit with you in a few minutes what I see as a trend and as a challenge ahead, looking back 20 years, but also looking forward 20 years, what I think the European Union is called to do in a little bit longer term perspective. But also happy to go back to any other topic, including last weekend in the conversation. If I have to summarize in very short term, the two mega trends, the two big trends I see globally today and for the next 5 to 10 years, I would say that fragmentation fragmentation of power and multipolarity is probably the first and most obvious one. Centers of power multiply without a legitimate functioning multilateral system. This is the main element that I see today. More centers of power and less effective and less credible and recognized centers for govern the centers of power. And I think that the Russian aggression against Ukraine is a perfect example, perfect and very sad and worrying example of that. Is not only, obviously, it's first and foremost an aggression against the sovereign state, but it's also, to me, an aggression to the multilateral governance system. You have a permanent member of the Security Council, nuclear power, that is violating all principles of international law, which in itself destroys the credibility of the UN system in a very worrying way. So on one side, I see this fragmentation of powers. On the other side, I see the disruption of the multilateral governance system and architecture from many actors. And on the other side, I think the main trend is the trend towards confrontation and competition. You mentioned that very clearly. This is going clearly against the lessons that we've learned as Europeans in these last 70, 80 years. At the end of the day, we are the result of a very brave, but also very intelligent intuition when our founding fathers, at the time only fathers, but then we catched up, realized that making economic cooperation was more convenient than making war. I think that was in a nutshell, the intuition that built the European Union. And it was not self-evident at the time, but clearly sharing interests, like on coal and steel, was the way to prevent war. That trend, that DNA, that forces us or encourages us to build cooperative models is today the most challenged one, I think, in the world. I think that the trend in the world today is really to go for competition and confrontation in all possible ways. And I think that this is going to be the most difficult challenge for the European Union in the future. How do we position ourselves in a world that is more fragmented, with less multilateral structures, and goes more and more competitive and confrontational rather than cooperative? How do we define ourselves? I think that this is our existential question for the next 5, 10, 20 years. Personally, I see two ways in which I hope and I wish the European Union would position itself in this framework. On one side, I hope and I wish that the European Union will be able to contribute to redesigning, reshaping, rebuilding the multilateral governance architecture. It will be needed one day in all sectors, in all fields. Building alliances, building partnerships, not an easy thing probably 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 3 years from now. elections do shape our foreign policy agenda, and we know that elections, not only last weekend, but also in November in the US, will shape the foreign policy agenda of the world and of the European Union very significantly. So with which allies will we do this is the big question. But also, I hope and I think that the European Union will manage to, and I'll conclude on that, to do two things at the same time. And we're normally capable of doing that. We are quite multitasking as an organization. On one side, to continue, I would say, the strengthening of our defense capabilities. It's a matter of survival, it's a matter of self-interest, it's a matter also of contributing to security of the world. So we just need to continue doing it and doing consistently and with the right resources. But also at the same time, I hope that we will be able to stay true to ourselves in terms of staying and being a cooperative power in the world. Building your own defense capabilities doesn't mean that you turn into a conflictual power. You can use your strength, you can use your defense capabilities at the service of peace and cooperation in the world. And this is exactly why we need to do that. This is why we need to be autonomous, because in case others in the world choose to go the conflictual way, including on a military side, you need to have a European Union that is able to be a power, including a defense power, at the service of its own agenda that I hope will continue to stay a peace and security and cooperation agenda in the world. And I'm sure that this will continue to be our line of action, because at the end of the day, you were asking at the beginning, what is peace? This is one of the most difficult questions to be answered, but I have clear in my mind that peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is freedom, is security, is human rights, rule of law and democracy. You can have an apparent peace that doesn't translate into a well-being for the population. And there are fights that are worth fighting for to build a sustainable peace for everybody. So it is important to have a strong defense identity and instruments in the European Union as Europeans, exactly to be sure that we are able to put this at the service of our peace agenda. I'll conclude with that, and thank you very much for the attention and the invitation.
Thank you very much. And with this, I'll pass the floor to Ambassador Heusgen.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to just a bit pick up of what has been said before, and then also make 3 points. First, I want to pick up what Minister Pistorius said in his opening remarks, where he made an appeal not to surrender to pessimism. And I think this is something that, for me, is key. Objectively, we live in a very good situation in our country and in Europe compared with other continents. But of course, we have the challenges of climate change, of Russia, of our demography, etc. So yes, there are challenges. But we have been able to cope with those in the past. When you look around in other countries, even in Europe, you even go down to your country, Federica, and you see the mood is different. So we have to change that mood. It's easier done where I come from, where Minister Schawan comes from in the Rhineland. It's easier than maybe here in Prussia, but it can be done. One of the prerequisites is, of course, that we speak out clearly. I think what we have been trying to do is to say, yes, we have these challenges and we'll cope with them. And then we'll present possible solutions, and then we see, well, it doesn't work out. And we kind of, say, well, we're trying our best. And there comes this dissatisfaction. I think one has to call a spade a spade. And that this works, again, I say this not only when he is here, but Minister Pistorius has been saying, yes, we have to be kriegstüchtig. In his speech, he said, yes, the challenge that we face right now in Ukraine from Russia, is maybe the toughest challenge we have had in decades in the history of our country. And we have to call it out. And I think to say, well, somehow we'll manage, it's not as serious, this is not going to work out, people won't believe it. So what do we have to do? 3 points. Number one, we have to speak very clear about the challenge that we have. We do with the Munich Security Conference what we call a Zeitenwende on tour, where we go with local and regional media. We travel around Germany. We have been in 27 places where we organize town halls, where we try to go into schools, where we try to go into Volkshochschulen, talk to business and just explain why do we need 2% to spend on defense, why we have to confront Russia, etc. And of course, you don't reach everybody with this exercise, but you have to do it. If you don't speak to the people, if you don't enter into these discussions, I think you lose it. And also, when we talk about, well, in the past it worked out with Russia, and you just have to be nice. The minister mentioned that 25% of people say today you can, Ukraine should surrender and everything is fine. Well, yes, there was Ostpolitik, which was an opening to the East, but under our Chancellor Brandt, the defense budget was more than 3% of GDP in average, and this Ostpolitik was carried out by a policy of strength, and that's what we need to do. So this is point number one. Point number two is Europe. Yes, we have to do much more in European affairs. I only want to discuss security and defense. The challenge is, in this part, it is the core of national sovereignty. When it comes to agriculture, when it comes to trade, to other issues, well, it's very easy to communitarize. But when it comes to security and defense, this is really goes to the heart of national sovereignty. But again, I think it's time for us to be ready to take this additional step. What does that mean? It means that, number one, and this is maybe a discussion, if I may, or a question for Mr. Pistorius, are we ready now to really extend the rules of the internal market? Are we ready to extend that to the market of security and defense so that we have a real competition and that this is then, of course, a competition between all the defense procurement companies, but there could be so much money saved if we were to really ask countries to make public tenders Europe-wide for certain products. And this would, I think, force countries also to cooperate. Number two, the minister mentioned the European Peace Facility, which I think at some stage was planned to be for Africa or something. It's now used here. We have to admit that when your successor, Mr. Borrell, had the idea, Germany was not among those countries that said, yes, let's go ahead with this. But we have been following up on that, and I think we need to do more on financing through European funds for European defense. Ammunition is a good start. We have to do more on that, and then we also have to think about European financing for joint European armament projects, so that the European Union funds projects where several countries work together to be more productive. And then the next question is, are you ready for a commissioner for defense? And then one more question, I don't want to discuss too much your headaches on budget and how to get 2%. One of the possibilities, of course, is to save more money by European cooperation and by maybe allowing for defense, European defense bonds, so there can be some European debt for common European procurement as we had it after the crisis, after Corona, where we were ready to go that way. I think we are in an existential crisis. We have to see that we step up to the plate on defense, and I think some measures could be taken. You know, the minister mentioned as among the greatest Europeans, the only one you mentioned was Robert Schuman, but Robert Schuman was just a simple minister. Minister Pistorius initiative, here we go. Third point. I'm a simple minister. Third and last point, I want to pick up what Federica Mogherini said about Europe and Europe to remain partner, a worldwide partner. And I think we need to do that. Europe benefits from worldwide trade. Europe has a good reputation worldwide. We have been, when it comes to development aid, Germany and other countries have been really forthcoming. Germany is the second largest donor to the UN system. What I appeal for is that we don't forget what is the basis of this. And the basis of this, and where we have to work on, is the minister mentioned the rules-based international order. I think sometimes we forget that what made Germany strong, this is our constitution, where we just celebrated our 75th anniversary. What made the European Union strong was Robert Schuman, and afterwards the mothers and fathers of the European that built the European institutions. We don't go to the battlefield anymore, but we go to the Council, or we go to Luxembourg, to the European Court of Justice. And this is something that we forget on the world stage. We have to insist on the Charter of the United Nations, of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, of all those rules that have been established on the basis of the Charter. We have to respect the rulings of the international courts. If we start to doubt that, then we doubt the very basis of where Germany and Europe come from. So instead of the rule of law, we will soon have the rule of the strongest, and this is what we have to prevent. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you for these opening statements. And Ambassador Heusgen has asked a series of questions to you. I'd like to give you a chance to respond if you'd like.
I forgot all the questions, especially the one when it comes to the budget. We are still discussing it, and I think we'll have a result in between. We need a result in between the next 4 weeks, because when it comes to going to Washington for the anniversary summit, the 75th anniversary summit of NATO, we have to have a result, and we have to show the proof that we are willing and able to do more for European defense, for German defense, and to do more for achieve a better burden sharing when it comes to defense and deterrence. So therefore, I hope we are achieving whatever we need. When it comes to armament cooperation in Europe, well, to be honest, we are all very egoistic. And if you look, for example, at the German defense industry, it's private organized. It's a private industry. In France, it's semi-private, semi-public. Everybody has its interest. We talk about Swedish aircraft, we talk about French aircraft, we talk about German tanks and German Panzerhaubitzers, and so on and so on. And each of us want to sell as much as possible to each of the others, which won't work. And then it comes to the results I described in my opening remarks. We have dozens and dozens of different systems, although we are willing and forced to exercise and fight together when it comes to the case of it. So I don't see that solution at the moment. Therefore, we start bilaterally, like with France, for example. It is very difficult still, but Sébastien Lecornu and me, we really achieved in between 1 year very important next step when it comes to MGCS, our ground combat system of the future, which nobody expected after 6 years of not really seen many progresses. So we are at the next point. But still, it's a long way to go. And this is, I think, the biggest challenge we have to face at the moment, because we see the challenge, we see the threat, we see the necessities to cooperate more and closer, but we don't draw the right conclusions out of it, not yet. So we have to discuss it more frankly and more closely to the real challenges, not what some of us would like to achieve when it comes to our own interests. And what I really I'm concerned of is when we look on November to the elections in the US, or when it doesn't even matter whether Biden or Trump will be the president, because regarding China's rise, growing rivalry between US and China, and consequently US pivot to Indo-Pacific, we will have to do more in Europe for our defense. Not only when it comes to defense industry and armament cooperation, but also in cooperation of our armies, our armed forces. So we have to spend more money. We have to achieve the conventional deterrence at least more than we do today. And hope, and then of course we need the nuclear deterrence of the US, for example. And we need the US as the strongest partner in NATO, which is we can't verzichten. Wie sagt man verzichten? Do without. This is quite easy. We can't do without it. So, thank you very much. That's what I meant before. Therefore, it is so crucial to accept that finally. We have to do more if we want US do whatever they can, despite engaging itself more in the Indo-Pacific, which will happen.
I would like to pick up on a theme that was in all three of your remarks, and that is the importance for European response, for European cooperation, and for a more integrated European defense capacity. I think we have traveled a long way from your 2014 speech here, and I'd like to applaud that, and I'd also like to say that I remain struck to this day by the coherence and cohesiveness of the European response to the Russian war on Ukraine. I think that is quite remarkable, and nobody would have expected it had you asked before. But I also see it as a challenge, because on a lot of foreign policy issues, and you mentioned how much of a sovereignty issue defense is, Europe does not see eye to eye, has a hard time coordinating. On Ukraine, it was cohesive. It is much less so on the other war that is currently on television with devastating consequences for the Middle East, and the Palestinian population is something that a lot of people wonder as a forgotten zone for Europe in its response. Even the recognition of a Palestinian state is very uneven among European countries, where one would have hoped that Europe coordinates on a response. And if we go to Africa, if we go to places where there are very different security stakes, we don't see any hope, I would say, for a coordinated European response. Could you tell us a little bit more about how we get to a European cooperation and even integrated defense capacity in a world with such division on specific issues in areas that really are important for human well-being and life?
Well, Ambassador Heusgen just asked whether I would support the idea of a defense commissioner. Well, the answer is, how can we support this idea without having even a joint foreign policy in Europe? We don't have it. Not at all, even less than 10 or 20 years ago, I guess. So a commissioner for defense would not make any sense. What we might have, what we might need is a commissioner for defense industry. I would appreciate that, to do more in cooperation, to do more in joint procurement and so on. But as long as we don't have really one voice when it comes to foreign policy, how could we achieve a joint defense policy? We don't even act in the same manner when it comes to Aspides in the Red Sea. One country says, oh, we don't take part, the others do, yeah, but less, but only with some officers. We do send one of our frigates. So it's not a real, not really a homogenic scene we have. So therefore, I would rather say, one step after the other.
Federica?
I cannot do without picking that up. First of all, I fully agree on the fact that I think we are all ready, or we should all be ready for a commissioner on European defense industry, definitely so. Also because we have, as we speak about rule of law and abiding to our own rules, the treaties are clear, defense is a council competence. The competence that the Commission has is on industry and research. And there is a lot to be done on the industry of defense. As the Minister mentioned, this is, in my experience, this is the weakest point we have, is the industry of defense, exactly for the reasons you explained. Because here we enter into an industrial competition among Europeans and with some of our key allies in the world, starting with the United States, but also UK and others. So I think that there is a lot of work to be done in the Commission competences on industry of defense and research, including dual-use development. I mean, there's really a lot that needs to be done and needs to be done. So I would welcome very much having a European Commissioner for Defense Industry. Actually, already during the Juncker Commission, Commissioner Bieńkowska at the time and Vice President Katainen had that portfolio, and we did that together. The activation of all the, the peace facility started there with a lot of attention to the division of and respect of institutional competences, because the Council is rightly so very attentive and jealous about its own competences. What I don't agree with, obviously, is the fact that we don't have a common foreign and security policy and defense policy. I think we do. It is not easy. It is not automatic result of, it's not a natural expression of convergence, but nothing in politics is. Even coalition governments are complicated. I mean, here you have no, never. No, here at least you have a contract, which is something that in the European Union you don't really have. I come from a country. When you mentioned my country, I was a bit confused because I'm Italian, but now I've been 10 years in Belgium. Both of them are interesting, so I can speak about both. I don't know which is the country I know best anymore. But even in national politics, even in national coalition governments, think of Belgium, think of Italy, not to mention, I mean, I cannot speak for Germany. Taking a decision in a coalition government at a national level, a federal level, is complicated. You will hear plenty of different positions. You will have a lot of negotiations. But at the end of the day, you come up with one position, one decision on what to do together. And in my view, even if it's very difficult, very tense, sometimes very complicated, at the end of the day, I think that the European Union gets to a common position on foreign security and defense policy. I'm also impressed by the level of unity and relevance of the European response to the aggression against Ukraine. We were fast, we were united, we were definitely relevant, and it was not to be given for granted. I'm sure that in the Kremlin, calculations were different on our capacity to do things together and to hold together. Yes, you will always hear different views, you will always hear different voices, but at the end of the day, at the end of the Council, not at the beginning of the Council, but at the end of the Council, you find common decisions that hold. So I do think that we do have a common foreign security policy, including on issues and areas and conflicts on which national positions are diverse and different. In the Middle East, clearly, we have very different geographies, histories that determine different positions at national levels. But at the end of the day, I still think that the European Union has a position that is coherent, that is consistent, that is, by the way, consistent with the UN Charter and the parameters that were established long ago. What is missing there, I think, is the capacity to have leverage on the parties, but this is a different story. But I would say that the European Union does have a foreign and security policy, has a defense policy today, which was not necessarily the case 10 years ago. And I think that now we have the instruments, and a lot will depend on how the next institutional cycle will embody the actorness of the European Union in the world. I hope that in the next upcoming councils. Not only there will be a lot of attention on the President of the Commission and the Council, but also on the next HRVP, because that can make a difference in the way in which we play our role in the world.
Thank you. Pastor Heusgen.
Thank you. First of all, I think this is a very good agreement on the panel that we aim for a commissioner for defense industry. While we are at it, I think we could then also agree that on European level we find rules for arms exports, European rules for arms exports that we don't, I mean, this is directed towards us, that we don't believe that we have to have our own rules, but I think we should agree on European rules. It's a tough decision, but if we want a stronger Europe, we have to be ready to do that. On the common foreign security policy, I agree with Federica. I served for her predecessor, and when Javier Solana started, he hardly had an office there, and people didn't believe that he could make a difference. But Javier Solana did. He solved a lot of the problems in the Balkans when he took over. There was when Montenegro and Serbia were almost very close to also get into a war. He solved it, and this federation at the beginning, confederation, was called Solania at the time. And so he solved some of the issues. In North Macedonia, he was part of the Middle East Quartet, and Cathy Ashton and yourself, you worked on the Iran nuclear deal and others. So I think there are lots of ground. Two things. One, with all due respect again to ministers, it would be a good choice if heads of state and government agreed now for the successor for Mr. Borrell to have a head of state and government in that position, because this brings additional gravity and respect in the room of the European Council. I worked for Chancellor Merkel for 12 years, and you see there is, when you're head of state and government, you have a certain self-esteem, and I think to have the High Representative as a former head of state or government would give the job even more weight. But of course, it doesn't replace substance. In many things we do agree, in other areas we don't. When I was representing Germany at the UN, we were always trying to have European views, and I must admit it was again and again thanks to our Hungarian friends that we were not able to have a common position. So we have that problem, but then we have also another one. I'm retired now, so I can say these kind of things also. Our closest friends from France were not always the easiest. When I was at the UN Security Council 2019, there were 5 European EU countries in the Security Council. And I tried very hard to see if we have one view. Can't we just have one country of the 5 represented in the Security Council? This is, by the way, what the African Union does. They have 3 African countries, and most of the cases there is only one speaking. And we were not able to do this because of our French friends. Our French friends insisted, no, this is our French prerogative. We will always have a French view, so we were not able to have a common European because our French friends. And Emmanuel Macron gives these fantastic speeches about Europe, and I think it's very good that we drive forward, but sometimes, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and there somehow we have our challenges.
Thank you very much for these responses. We have about 25 minutes left, and I would like to open the room to questions from the audience. So if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. We have microphones going around. You have to make sure that you grab one. I see one right here, and we'll start with her.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just going to stand up.
And please present yourself briefly.
Yes. Hi, I'm Kim Tau-Schröder. I'm from the Hertie School. I'm studying international affairs in the security track. Thank you all for being here. Seeing as you just mentioned our French friends, that gives me I don't know how you say, like a very good lead to my question. I was wondering, considering the French election results now and the European elections and Macron's subsequent call for very soon parliamentary elections, how do you think this will affect any plans of your, for example, your European Commissioner for a defense industry plan or any other cooperation plans with France in that regard?
Thank you very much. Let me collect a second question if you'd like to raise your hand. We have one over here and one in the front.
Thank you so much. My name is Bill Papadakis. My question has to do with aid to Ukraine. We've seen that aid coming from Western allies in multiple stages, and at the beginning there was hesitancy about tanks, then about cluster munitions, then about F-16s, etc. And I wonder what explains that hesitancy, and do you think that having all that aid provided upfront rather than multiple stages much later would have made a difference in the course of that war? Thank you.
Thank you, and let me take the third question up in the front row, and then we will give you... Okay. Sorry, that question was a little bit hard to catch. Can you just repeat the main part of it? A little louder.
It was basically about the hesitancy in providing aid that came in multiple stages. So tanks at the beginning, cluster munitions later, F-16s later, and whether if that had all happened early on at the same time, would have made an important difference. Maybe what's the thinking behind?
Thank you.
Hi, Joanna Bryson. I'm a professor of ethics and technology at the Hertie School, but I am talking more in the capacity of being in the Center for Digital Governance. So my question is about this sort of reduction of sovereignty and simplification of the weapons systems. And one of the things that's impressed me the most in the last few years is the fact that Germany could entirely change its energy system in 6 months. That was amazing. And I feel like we don't recognize just how much more complicated logistics we can do now. And when I look at my own discipline in the digital sphere, we see too much concentration, and that often does lead to a lack of sovereignty within the EU. So I'm wondering if we could also attack this problem with something like a more complicated logistics system to maintain some of that diversity because of its resilience.
Who would like to answer?
I would like to start with a question about hesitancy. Well, I came in office 15, 16 months ago. The year was just almost 1 year ongoing. And before that, I was watching, of course, like a reader of a newspaper and politician in Lower Saxony, what's going on. And the view on it is quite different if you are standing outside or inside. If you are inside, you see suddenly, well, there are some other aspects which are as much as important as others when it comes to help and to support Ukraine as much as possible. And of course, the tanks could have been delivered earlier. But as we know today, the tanks have never been a game changer in that war. We are talking about a stative war, a standing war, static war, not a mobile war, really. We are talking about an artillery fight and not about a tank fight, really. So when it comes to all the others, things we had to deliver, and we delivered, they are really crucial. We don't have F-16. We don't have submarines we could deliver. They don't need that, by the way. So what we did is to deliver everything we are very specialized in, like air defense, like howitzers, ammunition. The problem we have in Europe and in other countries at the same time is our defense industry was not used to produce as quick and as much as needed. They were coming out of peace times. They produced much less than we need today. This is a really big challenge for the future for Europe too. Our defense industry, therefore we are working, Robert Habeck and me, on a defense industry strategy, because we need to achieve more resilience, more sustainability, and more capacities and capabilities when it comes to defense systems. Therefore, Ukraine does get anything we can deliver, but we can't produce faster than we do at the moment. The industry increases the capacities, but still it needs time. We are delivering almost every week ammunition, IRIS-T every second or third month, IRIS-T system, but still it's not enough. Another example, we provided 25% of our capacities of Patriot systems, 25%. Nobody did more. And Annalena Baerbock and me wrote a letter to our allies and partners and asked for more systems. We asked for more support for air defense because this is crucial. It had been crucial almost for 2 years already. But the answer was a lot of money for missiles and systems to be procured, but still it takes 3 times, up to 3 years by Raytheon in the US to produce those systems. And we got some air missiles, and that's all. Although there are countries who could provide 1 or 2 systems. And therefore it is so crucial to do what is really needed. When I went my first time to the Rammstein format, 1 day after having put to office, Milley, the chief of defense of the United States of America, told you at the end of the conference, there are 2 priorities for Ukraine, and that was in January 23. Air defense, air defense, air defense, and ammunition, ammunition, ammunition. But all the world were talking about tanks. And nobody really took care for increasing production capacities. This is the real challenge and the lessons learned out of that support for Ukraine.
Thank you.
I will try to cover the other 2, but give just personal thoughts. I'm also impressed about how Germany, not only Germany, but mainly Germany, managed to reconvert completely the energy policy. And I was also impressed, very much impressed about the shift that we have made and we are making still on our understanding of strategic autonomy. We've not talked about strategic autonomy yet as such, but in 2016, actually, we, for the first time, used the word in European documents. Before that, it was mainly a French concept. We crossed the border and started to use it as European Union. That was very controversial at the time. We were in different times than now. But at the time, between 2016 and 2019, it was mainly about military and defense. And I think that after 2019, first of all with the pandemic, then with the war against Ukraine, we realized that strategic autonomy has to do with military, but has to do a lot with everything else. Energy, the supply chain, health, and digital too. So I think, and the financial instruments, by the way, of which we don't talk much yet, but this is an incredible sphere of work for our increasing our strategic autonomy. So I think that now we have this full awareness. We have shown that, well, Germany first and foremost has shown that it is possible to reconvert if there is strong political will. And this is, I think, one lesson that the European Union is very strong about. We are always considered to be long and complicated, but I've learned that there is absolutely nothing that the European Union can't do if there is strong political will to do it. And normally, if you're told that this is not possible, it's because there is not enough will to do it. And we've seen it with the reaction to the war, and we've seen it with the reaction to the pandemic, where, again, bonds were used, and before that, it was a complete taboo, right? So I'm positive that the next frontiers will be increasing the strategic autonomy of the European Union in all other fields of action. Now, coming to the French election, well, the European elections, not only in France, everywhere in Europe. I mean, I'm out of politics now, and happily so. So I would not want to end on a negative note, but I'm afraid that, you know, still we are discussing about the European Union we know today. What worries me the most is the fact that 1, 2, 3, 5 years from now, we might actually have a completely different European Union than today. Today we're worried about the US elections. At least I am personally very much worried about US elections. By the way, on the support to Ukraine, that is what worries me the most. What will happen to the US support to Ukraine after January? In any case, but in one case more than in the other one, let's put it this way, and what will happen to NATO 6-7 months from now. This is my worry number one. But it could be that in 2, 3, 4 year time, we will have a European Union and the United States aligned on a different policy pattern than the one we have today. Then we would not have a problem on the transatlantic partnership, but we will have a different kind of transatlantic partnership, different principles, values, policies, and at the end of the day, we might need unanimity to preserve the European Union we have today. It's a completely reverse scenario. Hopefully we will not get there, but it is not excluded. In the immediate terms, I don't think the snap elections in France will have an impact. The institutional system is such that it's obviously the president that is expressing the national position in the European Council. Still, he will have to take into consideration the orientation of the government and the cohabitation. I don't think there will be an immediate impact on the course of action of the European Union, but I think that we are facing a trend. I'm not surprised about that because Italy normally anticipates political trends in Europe and worldwide. We've always done that in the 90s, in the early 2000s, so I'm not surprised. I think this is a global trend that we see towards the extreme right. What I was mentioning about the shift towards confrontational attitudes is, for me, this. I hope that we will manage to preserve the DNA of the wisdom that we have developed over time, which is not a wisdom that is a naive, principle-based order. Like Europeans like to make peace because they are nice and kind and naive. No, I think that we've learned the hard way. I think that we have learned that the cooperative way is more convenient, including economically. It's not out of principles, it's out of self-interest if we are together in this cooperative approach. I think we risk to miss that, but I don't think that this will have an impact in the short term in the European Union. But it might have 1, 2, 3 years from now, as national elections will potentially have some redesigning of the political landscape in the European Union. In this respect, I have to say, I think that the European Council is going to, the majorities in the European Council will count more than the majority in the European Parliament. And that doesn't change immediately, but that might change in some years from now. Sorry, that was not a positive note indeed.
Thank you.
I count on you on that.
Christoph Heusgen is passing the floor, so we have time for another round of questions. And now the hands are going up. You've been shy before. Let's collect. Maybe start on the left, and then we'll move to the right.
Hello, my name is Steve. I'm a student at the Hertie School. I want to chase a little bit on the question of a common defense and security, foreign policy at the European Union level. We know there's a disparate number of strategic cultures across Europe. It's not simply just a France, Germany thing when it comes to EU strategic culture. So my question to the panelists is, how do you pull the disparate strategic cultures together to create a common European strategic culture that would then underpin the common European security and foreign policy?
Thank you very much. Let's also move to the other side of the room.
Thank you. Simon Walker, PhD candidate in philosophy. I wanted to ask a question about political communication and the logic of defense. There's been a kind of implicit tension in a lot of the answers so far, which we notice across the political spectrum, on the kind of liberal order, protection of rules of law, protection of human rights as the reason for defense. We've noticed the tension between Ukraine, the responses in Ukraine and the responses in Israel-Palestine around this. The global south often points out the way that the kind of liberal international order is some sort of veneer to protect European hegemony and actually sees a kind of Schmittian logic underlying that order. Also, as we move from a period of peace into a period of potential further conflict, I think we're going to see those tensions emerge more, where respecting human rights is actually going to happen only when it benefits Europe rather than protecting that order in general. And I guess my question, given that, is, do you think there's a problem in communication around the liberal order that we have in Europe, which I think arguably could be the case with the 25% of people who now no longer seem to support that? Or do you think, as we move to this period of conflict, we are actually going to enter more of a Schmittian world where a friend-enemy distinction becomes more important than protecting what we regard as things like human rights?
Thank you very much. I saw one question in the back, if we can go all the way to the back, and then we'll come to the front. That's 4. I hope that's okay, because that will be the last round of questions.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm also a student at Hertie. I'm studying international security. So my question is, I noted it down. So even though I'm all for a stronger EU in the world, achieving strategic autonomy, I also think it's really important to address the nature of the armament sector and what comes with building up a stronger European defense industrial complex. And as Ms. Mogherini said in her initial address, which I really appreciated, to not forget our identity as a peace promoter. I wanted to ask, how do you consolidate the two with each other, promoting peace, but also maybe benefiting from wars in the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last question on the left, whoever manages to get a microphone.
Hi, Maike Kreuter, also international security student. Minister Pistorius, you appealed to us students about getting involved into security, and already in the fall at the NATO talk, you talked about how this country has a problem with not enough young people invested into its defense. I know there's a lot of students at this school, especially in the security track, who want to work in the German defense sector but feel that their options are very limited. So my question would be, how is your ministry trying to draw the young people into it and into the Bundeswehr to enhance the quantity and quality of the future defense personnel?
Thank you very much. I suggest we answer the other way around, this time starting with you, Mr. Heusgen, and then we let go down the road.
Yes, the first question was on strategic culture. Sorry. I think we have come a long way. Again, sitting next to Federica, I think about my time with Javier Solana. When we started in 1999, 2000, he at some stage sent me to Warsaw to a conference and asked me to make some commercials, PR for European security and defense policy. And I barely made it unharmed out of the conference, because for our Polish friends, it was totally unacceptable to just spend €1, think one moment about European defense. Our Polish friends 25 years ago only thought about the US providing the only real defense. When you talk to the Polish government today, they are most welcoming it. They think we have to have a strong European defense, and they look forward to cooperation with us. I think we, by the way, Mr. Minister, we are trying very hard to get the Weimar Triangle to open the Munich Security Conference one day, because we believe that this is really a core instrument now for Europe to get together and to present solutions for the future. So a lot has changed. A lot has changed in our country. I mean, the question before about Ukraine, I mean, there was a principle in Germany for generations that we don't deliver weapons into conflicts. And now we are delivering like crazy into Ukraine. I mean, this change of mind is enormous. Some of us, like myself, sometimes believe it could have been faster, but objectively seen from the outside, I mean, we have really come a long way. So I think that this strategic culture we're going to develop, and sometimes we in Germany also have to say goodbye to some good old thinking. As I said before, common European rules with regard to arms exports. I think we have to really have European rules, because only then can we work together on multilateral defense structures, corporations. Nobody will be ready to join up in an effort with a German defense company if the partner is not certain that when there comes a demand where somewhere we should export weapons, when we say, well, but this country we don't like. I understand that, but we have to make a difficult choice there. Political communication, I tried to make this point in my opening statement, which is very important for me. I think, in particular with the conflict of the Middle East, which I hope we don't get into here today, because it is European defense is very important. But there's one thing which is very clear, and I realized that also when I was in New York, and I'm still very often in New York at the UN. We have to pay attention that the rules-based international order, that the international order that we as Germans have always promoted, that the rule of law is the key, is the base of our action in Germany, in Europe, and worldwide, that we are not ourselves undermining this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Federica Mogherini.
Yes, I will comment on a couple of points. One is on the strategic culture. Indeed, I think we've gone a long way. I think we have a lot to gain and achieve in this respect. It's going to be difficult to forge a common or a shared strategic culture. We are doing this, I think, progressively. We're doing this by doing, not by learning. And this is also why, under the pressure of crisis and conflicts and the need to respond. But I think this is also why it's so important to have you in schools like the Hertie School or the College of Europe studying together and forging together a common strategic approach among Europeans and also beyond Europeans. Because I have the impression that the common strategic culture is being developed more on the field than in theory. And we will need to catch up also on the theory. But I think that as complex it will be, it will also be very, very strong once we manage to come out of that with some common understanding. Because I've always seen the complexity of the European landscape as a point of strength. Because we have clearly a very different strategic culture across the European Union. We have neutral states, we have geographies that put our priorities very different. I mean, if you are in Malta and if you are in Estonia, clearly your strategic understanding is different for history and geography and for your constitutional frameworks. But I think that this complexity can give us the asset to understand the complexity of the world much better. The world out there is complex, and being complex ourselves helps reading the complexity that we have around us. So I think this is an asset. Obviously, it takes longer, and it takes a lot of work, intellectual and practical work to get there, but I think that then creates more solid basis for action. So on that, I see a lot of work that has been done, a lot of work that still needs to be done, but I'm very optimistic about our trajectory. On the communication side, I think we made one mistake at the very beginning. Obviously, you will always have inconsistencies here and there. You will always have different consistency levels on how you apply or communicate your decisions. But I think there was one mistake at the very beginning of the war that Russia started against Ukraine, the second phase in 2022. And that was that we stressed a lot the element of having, for the first time, war on the European continent, which obviously for us European was a shock. By the way, it was not truly the very first war after decades, because in the Balkans, they constantly remind us, you know, we had a war quite recently. But it was not an invasion, indeed. But it was a shock for us because we were confident that in the European space, we wouldn't have had war anymore. And I think that this shadowed the real point, which was breach of international law. And I think we should have stressed more the communication worldwide on the fact that breaching international law is serious for us and for our security in Europe, but it's actually even more serious. Sorry, I will use a stereotyped word just to understand each other. The weaker you are as a security player, the more you should care about the respect of international law, because that is the guarantee for your security. If you are a NATO ally, you can respond. If you are a military power, you can respond. If you're not, your only guarantee is the respect of international law. And we should have underlined much more that element, I believe. And the contradiction that I mentioned before of Russia violating, one of our professors in Bruges told me once, this is an intervention that ticks all the boxes of violation of international law, non-excluded. And this being perpetrated by a permanent member of the Security Council, this was the contradiction. This is what, for me, makes this war different than any other. That the same permanent member of the Security Council that is supposed to be the guarantor of peace and security in the world, breaching all elements of international law. This was the aspect that we should have underlined more. Coming briefly on the question about how do we manage, how do we square the circle about promoting peace and being also military power, I don't see a contradiction in terms there. We come from a history ourselves where we've seen that in some cases, to even to build democracy, even to build peace, even to get to peace, you need to use military force. I come from a country where it's in the constitution, here I am missing the English word, ripudio della guerra, the refusal to use war as a means, as an instrument to international relations. But the use of military force is not equal to war. You can use military force in other environments, in other circumstances, and in some cases, exactly to protect international law. Sometimes you need the use of force to enforce international law. And this is not new in European history. This is not new in the UN framework. You have military missions of the European Union, or in the UN framework, you have military operations where you have use of force at the service of peace. For me, it is quite obvious that the first instrument is always diplomacy, but you should never exclude the use of force should there be the need to do that in exceptional circumstances, like to respond to a military invasion. That is clearly the case. So I think that we have enough in our history and in our understanding as Europeans to know that that the use of force is never the preferred option, but it is not to be excluded in case it is needed, and especially in case it is needed to promote peace in an environment that otherwise wouldn't have any military player to protect international law.
Thank you. Minister, you have the final word.
Thank you very much. When it comes to that question, we do hire and we do have a lot of young people, scientists from all faculties, and of course we are trying to do it even better because we need you. We need smart people working in defense issues with conflict and peace issues, because we need all aspects, and therefore we are achieving that. We are just changing our policy of requirement of personnel, so there are jobs for you whenever you apply. Whenever you apply. The other point I would like to comment very shortly is strategic culture. I think strategic culture needs, in the first place, strategic unity, which we don't have in every situation, I think. We could watch that when the war against Ukraine began. Now it's much better, but again it starts getting more divided. So the unity was very strong in the beginning, and now we have some developments, which I am a little bit concerned of. We need unity to have a joint strategic culture in the end, and we have still a way to go there.
Thank you very much to all three of you for these very inspiring remarks, questions, and issues that we still grapple with. It was a real pleasure and honor to have you with us today.